over the riots. Let's speak with David Spencer, Head of Crime and Justice at Policy Exchange. David, afternoon to you, sir.
Hello.
Now, of course, our Home Secretary is meant to say certain things. It would be weird if she said nothing at all, although there is a suspicion that Home Secretaries don't get that animated on other kinds of crime, knife crime and the like, shoplifting in particular. We don't hear quite such robust words from our law enforcers, whether they're cops or politicians.
Well, knife crime is an interesting example as well, because we've actually seen knife crime rocket over the last decade.
Yep.
So in 2013, there were about 26,000 knife crime offences in this country. By 2022, that was over 50,000. So we do have a pretty serious problem with certainly some crime types. You're absolutely right.
Do you sense then, I mean, there's a lot of suspicion around what the government are doing, that it's nabbing people in the street, throwing bricks at houses, cars, setting fire to hotels, all of that stuff. Everyone wants to throw the book at those people. Where it gets a little tricky, maybe a little murkier, is in this online stuff. I think that's what's really fired people up. It's like, hang on a second, or a casual observer of something. So if I walk out of my house and there's a riot going on, apparently I could get scooped up in that and find myself doing jail time.
Well, certainly if you're involving yourself in the riot or encouraging people to do so, then the risk is certainly there, and quite rightly so. And I don't think we should take away from the fact that the people that are involved in the disorder over the last couple of weeks absolutely should have the book thrown out.
Yeah, indeed.
Arrested, charged, prosecuted and sent to prison as quickly as possible. There are other crimes, and you mentioned knife crime, and I heard earlier on the show you were talking about online child sexual abuse images.
Yep.
Undoubtedly, the book should be thrown at these people as well. And I think the problem that we have is that we now have a situation where not just the police, but the criminal justice system as a whole has been allowed to get to such a creaking stage that we're simply not able to deal with all criminals in such a robust and speedy way. As an example, we've now got 67,000 cases who've been waiting in the Crown Court to be heard for trial and for sentencing. 67,000 cases. That's up from about 30,000 back in 2019. So we have a 2-year backlog in most Crown Court trials, and that is just completely unacceptable. And the problem that we have is that all of the evidence shows that what really matters in deterring people from committing crime is that they are dealt with swiftly and there is certainty of punishment. And the problem is that for most crime at the moment, there is no certainty, because about 90% of crimes the suspect doesn't get found, and there is no speed, because it takes 2 years to get dealt with in the Crown Court.
What I suppose has perhaps riled a lot of people with this, and in terms of how, we know how the riots sort of began. It was a fairly, if you were analysing this in terms of protests of recent times, this would be a curious one, because it sort of started out with some misinformation. It then sort of morphed into something else. And very quickly, without it ever being organised in this way, it seemed to become protest/riots about immigration. And although that was never said explicitly to begin with, that's kind of where it went to. And so when people see the government, the police, the legal arm of the government clamping down on this in a way they don't see it on other crimes, there is a sense that the British voice, the British concern, the absolutely legal concern for something as serious as immigration is being ignored. And this is a government way of keeping people quiet.
Well, clearly there is a legitimate debate to be had about things like immigration, as an example. There is clearly a legitimate debate to be had about that. And of course, we've just had an election where people get to have their say as well. What is not legitimate is turning up either out of your head on cocaine and alcohol, shouting at the police and throwing bricks at the police. And there's clearly a difference between legitimate debate and protest and absolute out-and-out disorder, which is what we've seen in the last couple of weeks. Indeed. I think what does concern me is that it is entirely legitimate to have a debate about whether, as you've been saying today, whether there is a differential nature of the policing response or prosecutorial response between different types of crime. It is entirely legitimate for that debate to be had, and it shouldn't be shut down in some ways that have been attempted recently.